It's no surprise that Doctor Who Series 6 is one of the most experimental series of the show, telling one specific, highly interconnected story, serialising the programme in a way unheard of since Doctor Who was revived in 2005. When the decision was made to split Series 6 into two halves, showrunner Stephen Moffat decided to treat each half like its own mini-series, bridged by a mid-series finale with a big cliffhanger. Therefore, this mid-series finale would be responsible for resolving a number of storylines from the first half and kickstarting the storylines of the second. This halfway point would eventually become A Good Man Goes to War, an episode where the Doctor assembles an army to assault the military base Demon's Run in order to rescue his companion Amy Pond, who had been kidnapped by the mysterious villains of the series. A Good Man Goes to War is a divisive episode. Some people see it as a suitably climactic payoff providing a stark look at the Doctor's inner darkness, but others see it as a very self-indulgent mess of hypocrisy and random twists. So, which is it? Well, let's find out by taking a deep dive into A Good Man Goes to War.
Demons run when a good man goes to war.
As we all know, the big twist at the end of The Almost People reveals that Amy Pond in Series 6A was actually an artificial clone, since the real Amy was taken shortly before the trip to America in The Impossible Astronaut. It's daunting to think that this whole time she hadn't even been real, and we never even knew because there was never an indication. It's a very scary premise, this idea that almost the whole series so far has featured a completely fake companion being used to hide the plan of the overall antagonists, showing the power of the villains and how easily they were able to fool the main characters, even breaching the TARDIS itself to project this fake Amy. At the end of The Almost People, the Doctor vowed to rescue his companion from wherever she was, and A Good Man Goes to War picks up on that plot thread, tricking the viewer into thinking Amy is telling her newborn baby all about the Doctor coming to rescue them. But in a fun twist, it turns out she's actually talking about Rory, who infiltrates a Cyberman fleet without fear and confronts an entire group of the villains in such a badass moment. This is a man who has lost his wife, the love of his life he already spent 2,000 years protecting. It really shows his determination and bravery, how he won't let anything get in his way, and Arthur Darvill is perfect during this scene, brilliantly communicating his anger and dedication to rescuing Amy. Although I will say it's kind of weird that despite being so against killing, the Doctor commits genocide just to make a point. I mean, I know it's just Cybermen, but that's still genocide, dude. Just no. Rory's next step is collecting the Doctor's long-term ally River Song, who now actually remembers Rory as their dad, unlike the Big Bang where she had absolutely zero emotional attachment to him and noticed him about as much as Stevie Wonder noticed he was performing at the Frost Fair of 1814. I do love the fact that River turns Rory down. This is the only properly established character invited along, but she refuses the invitation because of some mysterious prophecy, since she's from the future and obviously knows everything that's going to happen. It says a lot about the stakes of the story about to happen, but her speech about Demon's Run is definitely a bit tacky.
The Doctor's darkest hour. He'll rise higher than ever before and then fall so much further.
Really? Demon's Run is that? Not, you know, the complete and utter destruction of every Time Lord in existence on the last day of the Time War, when he killed his entire species and his own home planet, pushing him into a deep spiral of depression and PTSD across multiple incarnations as he grapples with the constant guilt of slaughtering his own people? That's not his darkest hour? Oh, but wait, no, I forgot. A Good Man Goes to War is definitely his darkest hour because one random soldier with a goofy name dies and Melody gets taken despite being there as River right at the end. Yeah, definitely the darkest hour. Definitely. Demon's Run is a brilliant setting and it looks great visually. It kind of reminds me of the Shadow Proclamation, this big asteroid in deep space looking very ambitious and suitably science fiction. We always hear about these vast empires and military outposts in Doctor Who, so it's nice to finally see one, and it's quite reminiscent of Halo or Alien with all the soldiers in regular fatigues, despite being in the far reaches of space in the far future, so it elevates Doctor Who to a new level of sci-fi and futuristic visuals. It turns out all the soldiers are part of the Church of the Papal Mainframe, the Holy Marines we first met in the Time of Angels. It's cool that they get revisited in this episode, helping to deepen the world building by bringing back elements from previous episodes in the era. We only got to see a small task force in that previous story, so I appreciate how this episode ups the ante by showing us a fully fledged base full of the soldiers. Two of these soldiers are the thin, fat, gay, married Anglican Marines, who a lot of people point to as questionable writing in Doctor Who. Personally, I feel like it was just a well-meaning joke that fell flat. It's clear Moffat is just trying to point out the labelling and depersonalisation of people who don't fit the mould. They're the only people who fit that description, so that's what they get saddled with. Is it a good joke? No, not really, but it's simply misunderstood. What definitely can't be forgiven though is Moffat introducing a gay character just to kill him off in the literal next scene, burying the gays in such force even Chris Chibnall would be proud. I love the scene as the Doctor reveals himself, having infiltrated the base during the Colonel's big, rousing speech to rally his troops against the Time Lord. It's a scene all about the ominously robed headless monks, who rather surprisingly don't actually have any heads. Who'd have thought? It's a tense build up to the reveal of their true form, which is actually a deeply haunting visual, their necks all twisted up into little knots. I have no idea how they actually function or how they even survive their head being cut off, since, you know, it kind of contains the brain controlling our bodily functions. But it's just one of those Doctor Who things you have to overlook and just go along with. It really speaks to the dedication of this order though, intentionally beheading themselves and living a life permanently hiding their form. But rather frustratingly, we never actually get any further development as to what they believe in or what their religion is actually about, and they never appear ever again, which kind of makes them feel a bit pointless this episode. However, the whole hooded and robe characteristic sets the stage for this exciting and triumphant reveal of the Doctor. The music is incredible, swelling up with the same track as the Pandorica speech, and it really feels like a satisfying first appearance of the Doctor, who has been absent from the episode up until this point, about 20 minutes in. It's fun and clever how he captures the base, the lights being turned off to see chaos as the Marines don't know which monk he could be, creating a very tense standoff.
The Doctor is trying to make fools of us.
By setting up this standoff and the friendly fire it causes, the Doctor completely lowers the defences and allows his own army to teleport in and instantly take the base within mere minutes, showing the Doctor's tactical prowess and ability.
Demon's Run is ours without a drop of blood spilled.
Yeah, about that. Did you forget all the people the Headless Monks killed? I mean, I guess the lasers cauterized the wounds, so your statement is technically accurate. Before his assault on Demon's Run, the Doctor gathered people from his past who we haven't actually met before, like Vastra, Jenny and Strax. It's good for world building, seeing these aliens across space and time with a debt to the Doctor, which further implies all these countless adventures we've never actually seen. And there's even some good comedy of how out of place they are. There's a Silurian in Victorian London solving crimes and killing Jack the Ripper, and there's a disgraced Sontaran commander relegated to being a nurse, which feels very goofy in a fun way.
I can produce magnificent quantities of lactic fluid.
So Strax has big mummy milkers then? However, the implications of the Gathering Ally scene are deeply disturbing.
If that man is finally collecting on his debts, God help you. And God help his debtors.
The Doctor never does what they do for a reward. They never save people's lives with the expectation of collecting a debt for it. That just isn't the Doctor. The Doctor saves people because it's right, not because they can benefit from it, and they would never force anyone to risk their lives for them. Therefore, the idea of the Doctor going back to the people he saved and guilting them into sacrificing their lives for his crusade is very, very wrong, especially because they don't all consent to it. So the obvious comparison to this episode is the Series 4 finale, The Stolen Earth and Journey's End, where previous characters from the show banded together to help the Doctor defend the Earth from the Dalek threat. However, in that, the companions are the ones seeking out the Doctor and choosing to help him. They all make the choice independently because of their previous experiences with him. He doesn't rock up and say, "Yeah, you owe me for that one time I saved you, so come fight for me and possibly die."
There are people all over this galaxy that owe that man a debt.
You're seriously telling me that the Doctor went back to all these people to form a literal army of them? The Doctor has never gone out of his way to do stuff like this, and when he does it in A Good Man Goes to War, it's seen as some heroic moment rather than a horrifying abuse of his power. It's like Moffat got the wrong impression of that Davros scene in Journey's End, where the villain exposes how the Doctor has turned his companions into warriors who would throw away their lives for him, just like all the side characters from across the modern era. The Doctor has always toyed with human lives and convinced people to die for them. This has long been established. But the difference is that that was never premeditated. It was with the people who were there at the present moment in time, and they took it upon themselves to make those sacrifices. What the 11th Doctor does, however, is go across space and time to a bunch of different people to convince them to die for him. The whole team up thing just feels so wrong and unlike anything the Doctor would ever do, but it's never properly addressed as being so. A point could be made about how these extreme and uncharacteristic measures show his determination to find Amy. His best friend has been taken from him and he wants to rescue her no matter what, so it would make sense he'd become a bit out of control. But the show never really questions his actions and actively glorifies them. I know this is all addressed with the scene between the Doctor and River at the end, where she shows up after the battle and he's furious at her because he's always come running when she needed him, but having River lecturing him on how far he's strayed from his path feels like Moffat trying to have his cake and eat it too, because of how this episode has hyped all this up. The whole story has had countless characters gushing over the Doctor and bigging him up because of how incredible he is. They're always talking about how awestruck they are that he blew up the Cyber Legion and chased the Atraxi off Earth. It makes sense that these stories would spread, but it shows how the episode wants the Doctor to be some huge warring godlike figure. Even River praised him for this stuff in Forest of the Dead, so it feels like the episode doesn't really know how it wants to portray the Doctor. It's all triumphant with the army gathering in the battle, which conflicts with the supposed message of condemnation of his actions. Compare all this to The Waters of Mars, for example. In that episode, the Doctor is faced with a moral dilemma of whether to leave the victims of a fixed event in time. You can slowly start to see him struggle more and more with the weight of this choice. It all culminates in him becoming completely unhinged and turning into the Time Lord victorious, a complete madman with unlimited power and disregarding the laws of time itself. Both the writing and the music continually present this as a dark and twisted path for the Doctor to start down. But A Good Man Goes to War never does that outside of one scene at the end. It always hypes him up and uses heroic music, despite him supposedly being unhinged and out of control. Yes, after taking the base, we get to the point where the Doctor has risen highest, conveniently spelled out for us by Vastra.
My friend, you have never risen higher.
Handy that, we would never have guessed. But because this episode is full of poetic prophecies and Moffat dialogue, River's ominous warning means the Doctor is going to fall even further, and this comes in the form of the incredible, yet completely ridiculous reveal that Melody's DNA includes Time Lord. Apparently this is because she was conceived in the TARDIS on Amy and Rory's wedding night, and somehow she gained Time Lord DNA from exposure to the Time Vortex? Yeah, because that's definitely how DNA works.
Doesn't make sense. You can't just cook yourself a Time Lord.
I guess in Moffat eyes, Time Lord conception just means a lot of banging in the TARDIS. No wonder it has so many bedrooms. And since the Doctor has a cot from his time as a baby, I guess this whole storyline is Moffat's way of saying, if you believe in looms, you can just do one. The whole half Time Lord DNA thing is retroactively made even messier considering the Timeless Children established that Time Lords aren't actually a natural species and regeneration is artificial. But hey, it's a great moment representing the turning of the tables, so I guess it's okay to sacrifice a bunch of lore. Indeed, all the pieces begin to fall into place. In the opening story, there was a mysterious little girl being forced into a spacesuit that would one day kill the Doctor, along with the ending showing she could regenerate. Oh, and the episode had even shown Amy holding her as a baby. So A Good Man Goes to War finally connects all these dots by revealing it was Melody all along, because she was being turned into a weapon to kill the Doctor, although we don't get to find out why yet, since Madame Kavarian had laid out a trap to let the Doctor believe he'd won and withdraw all his forces. I love the scene as the monks return to Demon's Run, slowly advancing on the small band of protagonists who must now make a desperate stand to protect Amy and Melody. It feels very climactic since there are just 5 of them against this order of brutal, unforgiving monks. They just wordlessly shuffle along slowly and menacingly, feeling unstoppable because they have absolutely no fear and completely outnumber the heroes. And initially it even feels like there are actual consequences because Strax and Lorna die, but then Strax gets resurrected in a minisode and Lorna was only introduced 40 minutes ago. Literally her entire character was just that she had a childhood encounter with the Doctor. We don't know anything about her personality is just that one woman who met the Doctor that one time, and her only contribution to the story is sewing the plot reveal onto a cloth. She really doesn't feel very relevant, although it is a good moment as she finally gets to meet the Doctor and reminisce on their adventure, just for her to die and him to turn around to ask,
Who was she?
Because he didn't actually know who she was. It's a good way to show how the Doctor has become egotistical and blind to the suffering of those around him. Kind of similar to that Davros line in Journey's End, but it still feels hollow because of Strax's survival and Lorna being such a nothing side character. The stakes feel cheaper, instead of delivering on the potential of an Order 66 style massacre of established characters, which would truly skyrocket the stakes and show what the Doctor's bravado and recklessness has cost him, but instead it falls flat because it's just a bunch of randoms. Yes, it kind of feels weird to do a big team-up event like this because there was such a small pool of established characters to choose from. Stolen Earth and Journey's End were all well-established characters and companions from throughout the era and the two spin-offs. It all worked perfectly because of how familiar we were with the characters helping the Doctor, and the risk of their deaths lent a lot of credibility to the Dalek threat and the climactic nature of the story. But in A Good Man Goes to War, the only previously established characters are Mark Gatiss' voice cameo as a Spitfire pilot and Captain Avery from Curse of the Black Spot 3 episodes earlier, who wasn't even supposed to be in this story, because that episode was originally going to come after Let's Kill Hitler. Sure, the team up feels triumphant and epic, but we just don't have the personal investment we'd have if they even had someone like Liz 10, who appeared in Series 5, or Canton from the series opener. There just isn't any real recognisability there. And hey, having Canton there would also keep it all very entrenched within the early Series 6 story. A Good Man Goes to War is only halfway through the second series of the era. There just isn't enough to pull from when building this team up. By this point, it's well established that Moffat wanted Captain Jack Harkness, but John Barrowman was unavailable because of Torchwood Miracle Day filming in America, so they couldn't have Jack show up. Hell, even Oot Sigma was in the episode, to unleash a mind assault on the Headless Monks, but was cut during editing, presumably because the monks have no brain or ears. So to Moffat's credit, it wasn't like he didn't try to branch out and draw from the past, he just couldn't get who he wanted, meaning he had to create these brand new characters and pull from the limited amount of characters from his own era, because I mean, what was he gonna do? Have Craig and Sophie bring an army of chimpanzees to rip people's faces off and fling their poo at the monks? The ultimate unravelling during the climax of the episode is the dramatic twist that the baby Melody herself is also a ganger, planted as part of the trap for the Doctor. It's a really tragic moment, the soundtrack punctuating the scene and driving a dagger right into your heart. Earlier there was a really cute moment as Amy and Rory were reunited and got to hold their daughter together, Rory meeting her for seemingly the very first time. It was a very wholesome scene with this family unit, the Doctor as the weird but cool uncle, even if he is actually the son-in-law. This earlier scene makes the rug pull of Melody so dramatic and painful because it truly feels like a loss. We've actually had time with the baby, so she's not a simple MacGuffin or plot device, she actually feels like a proper part of the episode. This means the whole aftermath of the story truly feels like a defeat. The Doctor has rescued Amy, but that's all they've actually achieved. The whole rescue has cost lives and they've lost Melody, so the tone is very depressing and sober, which is perfect for an episode like this.
So they took her anyway. All this was for nothing.
You can really understand Amy's grief and the Doctor's regret for all of this, because he feels personally responsible for the failure and the loss of Melody. I mean, he kind of is, but he also had no idea they'd pull out the classic ganger twist. Hey, don't worry Doctor, it happens to the best of us. In an episode full of massive twists, the final scene has the biggest revelation of them all, revealing that River herself is Melody and has been all along. It's weird how the Doctor suddenly perks up and forgets the numerous deaths and permanent PTSD of his best friends who have just lost their baby, but I think the final scene is similar to the end of Empire Strikes Back. The protagonists have well and truly lost this battle. They have come up short against their enemies and have also had one of their own stolen away to parts unknown. The Doctor is Lando and Chewie, flying off into the universe with the promise of rescuing Melody. Amy and Rory are Luke and Leia, licking their wounds but standing in solidarity and hanging on to hope because they still have each other. And hey, the episode even has the reverse of the Darth Vader twist, as the cloth translates Melody Pond to River Song and she says, "No, I am your daughter." Obviously we've now had years of hindsight and the absolutely awful Flanderization of River, but this moment remains such a huge reveal, one of those that really makes you sit up in your seat and say, holy shit. I actually love how Moffat approached this from a behind the scenes perspective. Not only did he name Amy Pond that way because it mirrors River Song, but he also created fake endings for the read-throughs and only told Karen Gillan and Arthur Darvill the truth after those. In fact, only Alex Kingston herself had actually been told before production of the series began, influencing her performance in The Impossible Astronaut and Day of the Moon. He managed to keep it all a secret from both the audience and the cast themselves, which is always a brilliant way of making these kinds of twists and reveals work perfectly, sending the episode off on a high and even surprising the crew on set during the reveal. So it's a fantastic and memorable cliffhanger paying off this mystery Moffat began all the way back in 2008.
This is the day he finds out who I am.
Much like Let's Kill Hitler After It, A Good Man Goes to War is one of those Marmite Stephen Moffat episodes. It's very fun and slick with a lot of stylistic presentation and high stakes, but it's caught up in its own mythology. There's so much hero worship hyping up the Doctor, so it's very self-indulgent. It's basically completely impossible to approach it on its own because of how heavily serialized it is to the rest of the wider story arc. The whole episode is only there for the big twist, spending like 35 minutes building to it, so unless you're closely following the arc, it doesn't really have any value, and it would definitely be alienating to any new viewers. It's a definitive style over substance episode, with so much going on that doesn't really have that much meaning to it. It has a great premise, the Doctor going on this mission to rescue Amy from the heart of the enemy, but it muddles his character, not sure whether to condemn him or praise him for his actions. The villains themselves aren't really fleshed out enough, and the side characters are barely characters. It tries to be some big epic team up to show how the Doctor was wrong to raise an army because it has devastating effects, but only one character dies and it's someone introduced at the start of this same story. It's an episode that annoys me because I like where it was going and it's definitely visually impressive, but it just misses the mark so often. Therefore I would give it a C rank on the Series 6 tier list. The acting is brilliant, especially Matt Smith and Arthur Darvill, who both turn in absolutely fantastic performances. It's a climactic episode wrapping up some mysteries and beginning others, but it has a lot of questionable decisions and tries to impress and info dump rather than delivering a truly satisfying narrative. If I had to sum the episode up in one sentence, it would be this. If The Stolen Earth is Avengers Infinity War, then A Good Man Goes to War is 2017's Justice League. And I'd like to give an extra special thank you to my Diamond level patron Fallon Cortez and all my Gold level patrons Alex Marston, Basil Disco PhD, Calvin, Daniel Shillito, Franz Horn aka Line Vortex, Herna Verzog, Luke_SY, and Stefan Never Miller. Thank you so much for all the support.